Have you ever felt like you're fighting an invisible enemy inside yourself? A hidden side, full of desires you don't understand, impulses that scare you, and shadows that seem to control every step of your life. Even when you try to run away from them, imagine for a moment that this enemy isn't there to destroy you, but to reveal who you truly are. That the darkest parts of your mind are actually essential pieces of your true self, waiting to be discovered. In this video, we're going to break taboos and dive deep into the psychology of repressed desires and the shadow that lives within each of us. No judgment, no fear, just the raw, unfiltered truth. You're about to learn from the teachings of Freud, Jung, Krishnamurti, and other great masters who uncovered the hidden map of the human mind. Get ready for an intense and transformative journey that will challenge everything you believe about yourself and your inner freedom. If you have the courage to face your own shadow, stay with me until the end, because this might be the key that changes your life forever. The secret your mind doesn't want to reveal. Imagine for a moment that someone could open your mind like a book. Inside, they'd find your most beautiful memories, but also thoughts you'd never share with anyone. Fleeting ideas, impulses that seem to come out of nowhere, strange curiosities, even desires you're quick to bury deep inside. The question is, why do these thoughts appear? And even more, what do they say about who you really are? The truth is, the human mind is a labyrinth. Sigmund Freud, one of the fathers of psychoanalysis, believed there's a powerful force within us called the unconscious. It's like a vault where we lock away everything deemed forbidden. Traumas, fears, and unacceptable desires. But here's the catch. That vault isn't completely secure. From time to time, what's inside slips out. It shows up in a strange dream, an intrusive thought, or even in behaviors we can't explain. Freud believed many of these leaks were the result of paraphilias, desires or fantasies that fall outside what society considers normal. But here's the interesting part. Who gets to decide what's normal? If we look back through history, we'll see that what was considered natural in one era became taboo in another. In ancient Rome, certain behaviors now seen as immoral were widely accepted. In the Middle Ages, even a public kiss could be condemned. This shows us that moral codes aren't fixed. They shift with time and culture. Still, for someone carrying a desire deemed strange, it can feel like an invisible prison. Many silently wonder, am I abnormal? Am I bad? Or is this just another expression of the human mind? Carl Jung, Freud's student-turned-rival, offered a different perspective. To him, these impulses weren't signs of evil or illness but shadows, repressed parts of ourselves trying to surface so they can be integrated. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In other words, maybe the answer isn't to fight what's hidden, but to understand it. The real question is, how far can we go in exploring our desires without being consumed by them? This is where modern psychology steps in, trying to separate what's simply a different preference from what truly harms others or causes suffering. The line is thin, and it's exactly that line we're going to explore in this video. Where do strange desires come from? If human desires are like underground rivers flowing silently beneath our consciousness, then the question is, who opened the floodgates? Modern science and the great minds of psychology believe these impulses are born from the collision of three powerful forces: biology, life experiences, and culture. The brain and its dangerous shortcuts. Neuroscience research shows the human brain is basically a pleasure map. At the center of it is the reward system, structures like the hypothalamus, amygdala, and nucleus accumbens, which drives us to seek what feels good: food, affection, sex. But the brain isn't always rational. It links unexpected stimuli to pleasure and creates shortcuts. A random object, situation, or even a forgotten memory can become a trigger for arousal. When this mechanism intensifies, it can give rise to fantasies or atypical behaviors. In other words, sometimes we don't choose what attracts us. It's the brain quietly wiring these associations in the chemistry of our neurons. Impactful or traumatic experiences. Freud believed childhood is the stage where the script for adult life is written. Small events, some long forgotten, can leave deep marks. Compliment at the wrong moment, a harsh punishment, an unexpected encounter with something a child's mind couldn't fully understand. These moments can be encoded as maps of pleasure or fear and later resurface in surprising ways. For example, a paraphilia like fetishism, the attraction to specific objects, might stem from an early episode where that object became linked to intense emotions, positive or negative. But does this mean every atypical desire comes from trauma? Not necessarily. Modern psychology recognizes that many unusual impulses emerge without a clear cause, as if they're natural glitches in the mind's software. The role of culture and the forbidden. Now think about this. If you lived in a society where walking around naked was completely normal, would nudity still have the same psychological impact? The Indian philosopher Krishnamurti once said, "We are the product of the culture that shapes us. Our fears, our desires, our moralities, all of it is programmed." Perhaps part of the allure of certain desires lies in the forbidden fruit effect. The more society represses a behavior, the more it can become an obsession for some minds. In ancient cultures, what we now call a paraphilia might have been part of sacred rituals. In other eras, desires we consider normal today were once seen as heresy. Desire, disorder, or diversity. Modern psychology makes an important distinction. If a desire causes suffering to the individual or harms others, it may be considered a disorder. But if it doesn't hurt anyone and doesn't control the person's life, it may simply be an uncommon expression of human sexuality. It's a delicate topic, a fine line between what needs to be treated and what needs to be understood. But here's a question for you to reflect on. If our desires aren't entirely chosen, to what extent are we truly responsible for them? When desire clashes with morality. Now picture this, you're alone in your room. Suddenly, a thought pops into your mind. You didn't invite it. You didn't ask for it to appear. But there it is, vivid like a movie playing behind your eyes. And you feel guilty, ashamed, maybe even afraid. Why is the human mind capable of desiring what it itself considers wrong? Freud and the inner battlefield. Sigmund Freud believed the human psyche is divided into three forces. The ID, our primal animal side made of instincts and raw impulses. The superego, which represents morality, social rules, and the voice of right and wrong. And the ego, stuck in the middle, trying to mediate the war between the two. When the ID feels desire, the superego immediately raises its accusatory finger. This is wrong. This is immoral. You can't think like that. This inner conflict often creates guilt, anxiety, and even repression. Freud argued that when we repress a desire, it doesn't disappear. It simply hides in the unconscious, like a beast waiting for the right moment to break free. That's why many seemingly normal behaviors may secretly mask a struggle between what we want and what we believe we should want. Jung and the hidden shadow. Carl Jung, on the other hand, offered an even deeper and more unsettling idea: the concept of the shadow. For Jung, all of us carry a dark side, thoughts, emotions, and impulses we reject because they don't fit the image we want to have of ourselves. The problem? The more you repress the shadow, the stronger it grows in the unconscious. And sometimes, it explodes in destructive ways. Compulsions, addictions, or even violence. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, maybe the way to deal with strange desires isn't to deny them, but to understand them, to integrate them into our awareness so they stop controlling us from the shadows. Krishnamurti and the weight of society. But here's another question. Are these inner conflicts truly ours? Or were they programmed into us by society? Jiddu Krishnamurti, a revolutionary philosopher, argued that morality is a prison built over generations of fear and tradition. We don't question the origins of our values. We simply accept them. Perhaps many desires are considered forbidden not because they're inherently evil, but because they challenge norms created by specific cultures in specific points of history. The price of living divided. For modern psychology, living with conflicting desires and constant guilt is like carrying an emotional time bomb. This state can lead to depression, anxiety, destructive relationships, and even more serious mental health disorders. The solution is not simple. It requires self-awareness, therapy, and above all, courage to look inward without fear of what you might find. Now let me leave you with one question that could completely change the way you see yourself. What if the thoughts and desires you fear the most don't define who you are? Maybe you are bigger than them. The brain, the mind, and healing. Is there hope? Imagine the human brain as a vast city with millions of streets, alleys, and hidden pathways. At some point in life, a tiny side street, a random thought, a strange desire, suddenly lights up like a neon boulevard. Why was that route chosen? And more importantly, is it possible to change the path? This is the question modern psychology and neuroscience have been trying to answer, and their discoveries are both unsettling and deeply hopeful. The moldable brain, we are not prisoners of our impulses. For a long time, scientists believed the adult brain was fixed, like a machine with unchangeable parts. Today, we know that's not true. Thanks to neuroplasticity, the brain can rewire its connections. This means that even if certain desires or fantasies have become entrenched as mental habits, they are not a life sentence. Brain scans show that repetitive thoughts carve deep neural pathways, like trails worn into a field of grass. But when someone works to change their patterns, through therapy, meditation, or deliberate practice, new pathways can emerge, and the old ones begin to fade. This is the foundation for treating impulses and paraphilias that cause suffering. The tools of contemporary psychology. Today, psychologists and psychiatrists use a combination of approaches to help people struggling with intrusive or compulsive desires. Among them, a CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, helps individuals identify automatic thoughts and replace them with healthier narratives. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, teaches people to observe their thoughts without becoming entangled in them. A mindfulness and meditation, techniques that calm the brain and reduce the power of impulses. A medication, in extreme cases, used to regulate brain chemistry when impulses spiral out of control. The goal is not to erase desire, but to reprogram the person's relationship with it, weakening its grip and restoring control over their actions. Reframing, desire as a teacher. Some modern therapists propose a bold perspective. What if desire, no matter how strange it seems, is actually an opportunity for self-discovery? Psychologist Esther Perel suggests that human desire is a mirror reflecting our deepest essence. Instead of demonizing it, we might ask, what does this reveal about me? What emotional needs are hiding here? Can I channel this energy into something constructive? Transforming guilt into understanding could be the first step toward a freer, healthier life. The silence of a trained mind. Neuroscience also shows that practices like deep meditation can literally reshape the brain. MRI scans of Buddhist monks reveal less activity in areas linked to attachment and compulsion. Krishnamurti would say this isn't just a technique. It's an inner revolution. True freedom happens only when the mind understands desire and is no longer its slave. But here's the most provocative question. What if the problem isn't desire itself, but the fear we've attached to it? The monster in the basement of the mind. Imagine an old house with locked doors and forgotten rooms. Down in the basement lives something you've never had the courage to face. You know it's there. You hear its footsteps, its whispers, but every time fear creeps in, you run to another room and pretend you didn't hear a thing. That house is your mind. The basement is your unconscious. And the something living down there is your repressed desire. Repression, what you bury, grows. Psychology is clear. When you push unwanted thoughts or impulses deep down, they don't just vanish. They become like the roots of a poisonous plant, growing in the dark until they crack the floor above. Freud called this the return of the repressed. A desire that can't find a healthy outlet will find other ways to escape. Disturbing dreams, explosive anger, secret compulsions, and in extreme cases, impulsive acts that can destroy lives. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You might succeed for a while, but the pressure builds and one day it bursts to the surface. Jung and the encounter with the shadow. Carl Jung believed every human carries a shadow within, a dark side made up of everything we refuse to admit about ourselves. He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens. Facing the shadow is one of the most painful journeys a person can take. It requires the courage to accept that within you exist both light and darkness, love and cruelty, control and wild desire. But those who refuse to face their shadow end up being controlled by it. People who seem too perfect often hide, deep down, an emotional chaos waiting to consume everything. When desire takes over. Extreme cases show what happens when the mind loses control over its darker impulses. Sexual addictions that tear families apart. Crimes committed in moments of emotional trance. People sabotaging careers and friendships because they don't understand what they're feeling. But what if the real danger isn't desire itself? What if the danger is the total denial of who we are? The courage to go down into the basement. Modern psychology suggests the path to freedom isn't to add more locks to the basement door. It's to walk down the stairs, turn on the light, and ask, "Why are you here? What do you want to teach me?" When we bring desire into consciousness, we can understand it and finally choose what to do with it. At that moment, the monster stops being a threat and becomes an integrated part of who we are. Inner freedom, the rebirth of consciousness. Perhaps humanity's greatest mistake is believing we can get rid of what we are. We try to lock away our fears, control our desires, and suffocate the thoughts that scare us. But the more we fight against what lives within us, the more we become prisoners of our own minds. Now imagine, just for a moment, that all this fighting stops. Imagine opening the door to that dark basement you've avoided for so long, and finally seeing, with clarity, what's been living there. Rebirth, from chaos to harmony. When you look inward without fear, something extraordinary happens. The desires that once seemed like monsters reveal themselves as wounded parts of you, longing for care and understanding. Modern therapy calls this integration. It's the moment when you stop being an internal battlefield and start becoming a whole, harmonious organism. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When we embrace the shadow, it stops controlling us. When we give our desires a voice, they stop screaming. And for the first time, you experience something rare and precious. Inner freedom. The path isn't easy, but it's possible. Freeing yourself from destructive impulses isn't about becoming a saint. It's about becoming human. Human in the deepest, most authentic sense of the word. It's recognizing that you have dark thoughts, and that doesn't make you evil. It's accepting that there are intense desires within you, and with awareness, you can choose what to do with them. It's learning to transform the raw energy of desire into something creative, loving, and constructive. Spiritual teachers like Krishnamurti went even further. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's understanding what you are. And there lies the key to understand yourself fully, completely. An invitation to awaken. Most people will spend their entire lives running away from themselves, but you don't have to be one of them. Today, you've already taken the first step simply by being here, listening, reflecting. So now I ask you, what's hiding in the basement of your mind? Do you have the courage to go down there and turn on the light? Leave your comment below. What struck you most about this video? Have you ever felt like you were fighting against a part of yourself? How did you deal with it? Share your experience. Sometimes your reflection could be exactly what someone else needs to start their own transformation. And if this message spoke to your soul, hit like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let's explore the mysteries of the human mind together. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung.